When it comes to the running back position, the Texas Longhorns have been on fire. 2 years ago, they had both Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, both of which ended up going to the NFL, and Bijan was the #1 running back in that year's draft class. Flash forward to 2023, Jonathan Brooks became one of the best running backs in the entirety of college football, and he was actually the first running back taken in the 2024 NFL Draft. Texas has a very good track record right now at the running back position, and they've already found a guy who could be as good as those three, or maybe even somehow better. His name is CJ Baxter. He was the #1 running back in the class of 2023 coming out of high school, was wanted by every program in the country, and last year as a freshman showed his superstar potential and that he can be the guy in the future for them. Now as we look forward to 2024, Texas has real national championship hopes, and CJ Baxter will likely be the starting running back and be a huge part of this team's success. In today's video, I'm going to introduce you to who Baxter is. We're going to go through his crazy story in recruitment, how he almost ended up at Florida State, how he did at Texas as a freshman, and how I think he will do in 2024. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about CJ Baxter. In order to understand how Baxter got to this point, we first need to go back in time. Baxter grew up in the state of Florida, and he was always a big-time athlete who loved football, and specifically liked the players of Odell Beckham Jr. and Lamar Jackson. He also liked a certain school, as he said, quote, "My dad was a really big Florida State fan, and I also grew up loving them. I started watching them when they started taking off, so that was a part of the reason too." When he eventually arrived at Edgewater High School, he was the only freshman on varsity. He was so special because he had great vision, and he could put his foot in the ground and have top-end speed and finish big runs. He ended up finishing with 10 touchdowns as a freshman, and early on, he was extremely highly touted. Going back a little bit even further, he was known before he even got to Edgewater High School, but he would have to wait his turn once he got there, as Isaiah Connolly would take the majority of the snaps while he was a senior. Baxter still though was a backup, and he also ran back kickoffs. He said, quote, "My biggest thing coming from Little League and then transferring to high school and playing varsity as a freshman is that I was frustrated. Because I was so used to being the guy in Little League, and you're used to having all the spotlight, and you don't come out of games or anything like that. Well, during his sophomore year, he would end up playing defensive back, linebacker, and running back as a sophomore, and would start to get a ton of hype. After this, he'd gained over 12 scholarship offers, and decided early on he wanted to go to Florida State. He said, quote, "That's been my dream ever since I was little, and I'm extremely excited. I've just been walking back and forth for the last hour, and my Twitter is definitely blowing up right now." At the time, he was a 4-star recruit and became the first commit in the 2023 class for the Florida State Seminoles, and was a huge get for head coach Mike Norvell. He ended up picking the Noles over South Carolina, Georgia Tech, and Auburn, but it would not last forever. He said, quote, "Since I was little, I've always been a Noles fan, and I don't think I made a bad decision, but I would like to reevaluate my decision and explore my options." Yeah, he'd end up going so national that he would decide to decommit and examine his other options. In his breakout year, he went for over 1,700 yards and 26 touchdowns, and this changed everything. He gained offers from all over the country, and while he was already a hot commodity before, his popularity grew exponentially, and it reached hysteria when Alabama decided to offer him. They would become interested in Baxter after a 4-overtime performance against rival high school of Jones High School. In that game, he carried the ball 40 times for 249 yards and 4 scores, and he fought off cramps and other injuries during the game to lead his team to victory. This got the attention of Alabama coaches, who offered him that Friday. He said he was shocked by the Crimson Tide offer, and said, quote, "It means a lot for a program like that to offer me a scholarship, especially because of how they produce NFL running backs, and everybody knows who Alabama is." If Baxter decided to sign with Bama during his senior year, he would have gotten a chance to play with Christian Leary, who was a wide receiver who was a freshman at Bama at the time. Not only was his performance against Jones insane for multiple reasons, but they were also one of the best defenses in the state, and this was a rare accomplishment for any player. He said, quote, "When they told me I had that many carries, I didn't really feel like it. I felt like I didn't have more than 30. His durability was something he had not been able to show previously, as he had dealt with various injuries for the first half of his high school career, and they even tried to limit him on defense so he wouldn't get beat up too much. After all this happened, Baxter said, quote, "More people are starting to see what I can do." At the time, he had over 32 offers from programs like Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Texas, and all the big state schools like Florida, Florida State, Miami, and UCF. So where would Baxter end up going? Well, he dropped a final 5 that included Arkansas, Ohio State, Texas, Texas A&M, and Miami. He'd eventually decided to commit to the Texas Longhorns, and it had nothing to do with Steve Sarkisian, their offensive game plan, or the history of the Longhorns program. He said, quote, "The biggest factor is Coach Tashard Choice. I've been building a relationship with him, and that was one of my main focuses. We know what he does coaching-wise on the field, but my biggest thing was him off the field. When I talked to him, just in general, he's a great dude and is very genuine. This was a key relationship, and he would choose the Longhorns over 52 other offers. This was pretty crazy. He ended up having to spurn Florida State and chose Texas for multiple reasons, even besides coach choice. He said, quote, "I feel like going through my recruitment process, I wanted to go someplace where I'd be used to the best of my ability and play as a true freshman. That's the reason why I picked Texas." Despite dealing with an injury issue as a senior, Baxter still managed to run for 1,300 yards with 15 touchdowns, and he also only played in 10 games. He'd eventually be selected to the Under Armour All-American game and was seen as the next big thing. According to scouts, one said, quote, "He's an elite running back recruit in nearly every measure. Baxter has the makings of an instant impact talent at Texas and a day one starter potential, and that can happen at many programs in the country." In total at Edgewater, he ran for 3,800 yards and 57 touchdowns, and that was pretty dang insane. According to 24/7 Sports, CJ Baxter was a 5-star recruit, the #1 running back, and the 22nd best player in the class of 2023. This was eerily similar to when they signed Bijan Robinson, and now Baxter would get a chance to play right away, and was hyped up by both the coaching staff and every Longhorns fan. So, how would CJ end up doing in Austin, Texas? Well, let's take a look. So when Baxter would arrive at Texas, they were tasked with replacing Doak Walker Award winner Bijan Robinson, as well as senior draft pick Roschon Johnson. He joined a room that was likely to see multiple players, as they had redshirt sophomore Jonathan Brooks. They also had Jaden Blue, who was at one point the #1 back in the country, and then another freshman as well. On top of that, they had Keelan Robinson, who had sort of been an afterthought, but was a senior and was expected to be back, so playing time was not going to come that easy for him. It was no surprise, though, that he became the lead running back early on, and during the offseason, he was eventually named the starter. From the time he enrolled as a freshman in January, he said, quote, "The first 2 games of the season, they had announced me as the starter, but I got banged up." Coach Sark also had this to say, quote, "You know he doesn't feel like a freshman right now. I mean, he worked hard in winter conditioning, he has a 4.0 GPA, and he went out and practiced with no nonsense. He provided a real mature mindset to everything that he does, and when Texas played their first game in the season, he became the first Texas Longhorn running back since Heisman Trophy winner Ricky Williams to start as a true freshman. That was all the way back in 1995, so nearly 30 years ago. As I said, Baxter would start that first game, and that would come against Rice. He ended up having 5 carries for 38 yards, and then in week 2, he'd also start against Bama, running the ball 11 times for 31 yards. He was off to a slow start, but he was also apparently injured at the time. From there, Jonathan Brooks would take over as the main back, and both him and Jaden Blue would have to be the backups. Against Baylor, he ran the ball 6 times for 21 yards in his first career touchdown, and then in a big win over number 24 Kansas, he had a season-high 67 yards in a win over the Jayhawks. He would then get a chance to play in his first Red River game against number 12 Oklahoma, and in that game he had 18 yards and they would lose sadly, and then after that he'd have his second touchdown of the year with 42 yards in a win over Houston. As we now got to the end of November, his role would start to increase. He ran the ball 9 times against BYU, and then ran the ball 10 times for 90 yards and a touchdown against K-State. Sadly for Texas and their star running back Jonathan Brooks, he would end up tearing his ACL, and he would be done for the year. That meant that Baxter would have to step in right away, and with national title and Big 12 championship hopes on the line, Baxter would have to be good. He'd end up running the ball 18 times for 61 yards in a win over TCU, and then the following week against Iowa State, he ran the ball 20 times for 117 yards. That was a huge moment for him, and then after that, he'd run the ball 9 times for 45 yards against Texas Tech, and the Longhorns were 11-1 and got a chance to play in the Big 12 championship game. Against number 18 Oklahoma State, Baxter was once again the starter, running the ball 13 times for 43 yards and a touchdown. He helped them advance all the way to the college football playoff, where they'd be matched up with number 2 Washington in the semifinal All-State Sugar Bowl. In that game, he would have a costly fumble, but he would end up running the ball 9 times for 64 yards and a touchdown. Sadly, Quinn Ewers threw the ball out of the back of the end zone at the end of the game, and they ended up losing 37-31. But it was still a really good year for Texas, and a good freshman year for CJ Baxter. In total, he ran for 659 yards and 5 touchdowns, and became one of the better freshman running backs in the entirety of college football. He not only showed that he was durable, but when he was called upon to step up, he had over 100 yards in that Iowa State game, and scored touchdowns in the 2 biggest moments of the year. This is also just for a player who's only 18 years old, so now that Baxter is going to be the #1 guy in 2024, has experience behind him, and should be fully healthy, the sky seems to be the limit for him. There's pretty much nothing that Baxter cannot do when he's on the field, as he has great size, great speed, he's durable, runs hard, and has excellent vision and footwork. And to me, he literally looks like he could be another Bijan Robinson. Maybe that's a little bit far-fetched to say, but Baxter has all the talent in the world, he'll have all the resources, and with Texas expecting to have a good passing game, all the pressure won't be on him like it was with Bijan at the time. We'll really just have to wait and see, but for now, Texas fans are really excited for him, and especially me. This is one of those players that I'm hyping up, and hopefully it doesn't bite me during the season, but I really do believe in Baxter, and I think he's going to be a really excellent player. But what do you guys think? If you're a Texas fan, what do you think of CJ Baxter? What do you think of this year's team? And if you're a fan of any other school, what players should I cover for the 2024 season next? I have tons of different players I want to cover, but be sure to let me know a suggestion down below. Also, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about Jonathan Brooks. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.